Bastogne, Belgium, January 21, 1945, 4:30 hours. The cold is beyond anything Harold C. Skipton has ever experienced. It seeps through his wool uniform, through his flesh, into his very bones. His hands, even wrapped in gloves, have lost all feeling. His feet are numb blocks of ice inside his boots. Around him, in foxholes scattered through the snow-covered forest, other men from the 101st Airborne Division huddle against the darkness and the cold, waiting for dawn, waiting for the Germans to attack again. This is not how Harold imagined war would be. When he volunteered to become a paratrooper, when he earned those silver jump wings, he pictured himself falling from aircraft into dramatic battles, fighting with courage and determination, perhaps dying heroically if it came to that. He did not imagine freezing to death in a Belgian forest, his body slowly shutting down from the relentless cold, his spirit worn down by weeks of siege and deprivation. He has been in Bastogne for over a month now. The 101st Airborne was rushed here in late December when Hitler launched his surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, what would later be called the Battle of the Bulge. The division arrived just in time to prevent the Germans from capturing this critical crossroads town. But arrival was just the beginning. The Germans surrounded Bastogne, trapping the 101st and attached units inside a shrinking perimeter. For weeks, the paratroopers have held their ground against repeated German attacks, their supplies dwindling, their casualties mounting, their hope fading. Harold shifts position in his foxhole, trying to generate some warmth through movement. It doesn't work. The cold is too deep, too pervasive. He can hear other soldiers moving nearby, coughing, muttering. Everyone is sick. Everyone is exhausted. The siege has ground them down to their absolute limits. They have held on this long through sheer determination and the knowledge that relief is coming. Patton's Third Army is fighting its way toward Bastogne, trying to break through the German lines. But for Harold, relief will come too late. In a few hours, when the January sun rises pale and weak over the frozen landscape, when the Germans launch another assault on the American positions, Harold C. Skipton will be mortally wounded. He will not survive to see the siege lifted. He will not go home to whatever family awaits him. He will die here in the snow, far from home, just 22 years old. This is his final day. But to understand how he came to be in this frozen foxhole, we must go back. Back to September 1944, when Harold made his second combat jump into Holland. Back to Operation Market Garden, the bold gamble that was supposed to end the war by Christmas. Back to the journey that brought him inexorably to this place, this moment, this death. Harold's story is the story of thousands of American soldiers who fought in World War II, young men who volunteered for dangerous service, who survived one battle only to face another, who kept fighting until their luck ran out or the war ended. His name is not famous. There are no movies about his exploits. For decades, even his own family did not know the full extent of his service. But his story deserves to be told, because in the arc of his short life and shorter military career, we find the essence of what it meant to serve in the 101st Airborne Division during the most critical year of World War II. From D-Day to Bastogne, from the beaches of Normandy to the frozen forests of Belgium, Harold was there. He jumped from aircraft into enemy fire. He was wounded and returned to fight again. He survived battles that killed thousands. And finally, on this January morning in 1945, his war will end. But first, we must follow his journey. We must understand the battles he fought, the challenges he overcame, the odds he defied. We must trace his path from the drop zones of Holland to the cattle trucks that carried him to Bastogne, from the triumphant liberation of European cities to the desperate defense of a besieged town. Only then can we truly understand what it meant when Harold C. Skipton died in the snow on January 21, 1945. This is his final journey. This is how a paratrooper went to war and did not come home. September 17, 1944, Holland. The C-47 engines drone as Harold sits cramped among his fellow paratroopers, flying toward their third combat jump. It is September 17, 1944, and the largest airborne operation in history is underway. Over 34,000 Allied paratroopers and glider troops are being dropped into Holland to seize a series of bridges, creating a corridor through which British ground forces will race toward the Rhine River and ultimately into the heart of Germany. This is Operation Market Garden, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's audacious plan to end the war before Christmas. The operation is divided into two parts: Market, the airborne assault to seize the bridges, and Garden, the ground advance by British XXX Corps up a single highway to link up with the airborne forces. The 101st Airborne Division has been assigned objectives around Eindhoven and along what will become known as Hell's Highway, the narrow road that British tanks must travel. Harold is more relaxed on this jump than he was on D-Day. Experience breeds a strange kind of confidence. He knows what to expect now: the fear before the jump, the chaos of landing, the confusion of assembly, the reality of combat. He has survived Normandy, survived being wounded at Cairnton. He is a veteran, a combat-tested paratrooper. He knows he can do this. The flight from England is long but uneventful. Unlike D-Day, when the formations were scattered by bad weather and German anti-aircraft fire, the Market Garden drop goes remarkably smoothly. The weather is clear, the formations remain intact, and German resistance is lighter than expected. When Harold C-47 reaches the drop zone, he exits the aircraft and descends into Holland without incident. The landing is textbook. Harold hits the ground in the assigned drop zone, releases his parachute, and quickly orients himself. All around him, other paratroopers are landing in neat patterns. The C-47s continue overhead, dropping stick after stick of soldiers. This is how an airborne operation is supposed to work, nothing like the scattered chaos of Normandy. Harold assembles with his unit from the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. The drop has been so successful that entire companies have landed together, with their officers and equipment intact. This is a luxury they did not have in Normandy, where it took hours or even days to assemble scattered units. Within an hour of landing, the 502nd is organized and moving toward its objectives. The Dutch civilians greet the American paratroopers with joy and celebration. After 4 years of German occupation, liberation has finally arrived. Men, women, and children line the roads, waving orange flags, the color of the Dutch royal family, and offering flowers, food, and drinks to the American soldiers. Girls kiss the paratroopers. Old men weep with relief. The Americans are heroes, liberators, saviors. For Harold and his fellow soldiers, this reception is overwhelming and moving. In Normandy, French civilians had been grateful but cautious, traumatized by years of occupation and afraid of German retribution. Here in Holland, the joy is unrestrained. The Dutch people have suffered under Nazi rule, have seen their young men deported for slave labor, have watched their Jewish neighbors rounded up and shipped to concentration camps. The sight of American paratroopers means freedom, means the end of their nightmare. But there is no time to enjoy the celebration. The 502nd has objectives to secure: bridges over canals and rivers, crossroads, defensive positions. The plan requires the airborne forces to seize and hold these objectives until British tanks arrive from the south. The timetable is tight. XXX Corps is supposed to reach Eindhoven on the first day, then continue north to link up with the 82nd Airborne at Nijmegen, and finally with the British 1st Airborne at Arnhem. The 502nd moves quickly to secure their assigned bridges. Some objectives are taken without a fight. The Germans are as surprised by the airborne assault as the Dutch are jubilant. Other objectives require combat. German troops, recovering from their initial shock, begin to organize resistance. Firefights break out across the operational area as paratroopers and Germans clash. Harold fights in several of these engagements during the first days of Market Garden. The combat is different from Normandy, more mobile, more fluid. The terrain is flat and open, lacking the hedgerows that had made every French field a fortress. This allows for more rapid movement but also makes the paratroopers more vulnerable. There is less cover, fewer places to hide when the bullets start flying. The 101st successfully secures most of its objectives, including the critical bridges near Eindhoven. On September 18th, British tanks from XXX Corps link up with the division, right on schedule. The ground forces push through Eindhoven and continue north toward Nijmegen, where the 82nd Airborne is fighting to secure the bridges there. So far, Market Garden is working. But problems are developing. The single highway that XXX Corps must use, soon nicknamed Hell's Highway by the troops, is extremely vulnerable. It runs through flat terrain, elevated above the surrounding fields, completely exposed to German fire. Any German force that can reach the highway can cut it, isolating the British tanks from their supply lines and preventing reinforcements from moving forward. The Germans quickly recognize this weakness and begin attacking Hell's Highway. The 101st Airborne, instead of being relieved by the British ground forces and withdrawn, finds itself fighting to keep the highway open. Harold and the 502nd are committed to defensive positions along the road, fighting off German attacks that come from multiple directions. The fighting along Hell's Highway is intense and confusing. German infantry, supported by tanks and artillery, probe for weak points in the American defenses. They infiltrate through gaps in the line, set up roadblocks, and ambush British convoys trying to move north. The paratroopers, spread thin over miles of highway, have to be constantly alert, constantly ready to respond to threats. Harold experiences combat at its most exhausting during this period. There are no front lines, no safe rear areas. The Germans might attack from any direction at any time. Soldiers sleep in shifts, always keeping watch, always ready to grab their weapons and fight. Food is irregular, often consisting of cold rations eaten quickly before moving to the next position. The weather turns cold and wet, adding misery to danger. Despite these challenges, the 101st keeps Hell's Highway open. British convoys continue moving north, though slower than planned. The 82nd Airborne captures the bridge at Nijmegen after desperate fighting. But at Arnhem, the northernmost objective, disaster is unfolding. The British 1st Airborne Division has dropped almost on top of two German SS Panzer divisions that were refitting in the area. Instead of lightly armed rear-echelon troops, the British paratroopers face elite German forces with tanks and heavy weapons. The British at Arnhem fight with incredible courage, holding a small perimeter around the north end of the Arnhem Bridge for days against overwhelming odds. But XXX Corps cannot reach them in time. The advance stalls short of Arnhem, stopped by German resistance and the narrowness of the approach route. After 9 days of fighting, the surviving British paratroopers are forced to withdraw across the Rhine, leaving Arnhem in German hands. Operation Market Garden has failed to achieve its ultimate objective. The bridge at Arnhem, a bridge too far, as it will later be called, remains in German hands. The bold plan to end the war by Christmas has not worked. The Allied advance will have to continue by more conventional means, which means more fighting, more casualties, more time. But the operation is not a complete failure. The 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions have liberated significant portions of Holland. The bridge at Nijmegen has been secured, giving the Allies a foothold across the Vaal River. And the two American Airborne Divisions have once again proven their worth in combat, demonstrating that they can not only seize objectives, but also hold them against determined counterattacks. For Harold personally, Market Garden is another survival. He has jumped into combat for the second time and lived through another brutal battle. He has fought in Holland, has seen more comrades killed and wounded, has endured more fear and exhaustion and horror. But he is still alive. He is still functional. He is still a soldier in the 101st Airborne Division, ready for whatever comes next. In early October, after nearly 3 weeks of continuous combat, the 101st is finally relieved and withdrawn from Holland. The division returns to Camp Mermelin in France, where it had been stationed before Market Garden. The paratroopers are exhausted, depleted, and in desperate need of rest and refitting. The division has suffered heavy casualties in Holland, and replacements need to be integrated into the units. Harold boards a truck with other survivors from the 502nd for the journey back to France. As they drive south, leaving Holland behind, he can reflect on what he has accomplished. 3 combat jumps now: D-Day, Market Garden, and the smaller operation in Holland. He has survived wounds, survived battles that killed thousands, survived odds that claimed so many of his brothers. He is one of the lucky ones, one of the survivors. But luck is a finite resource, and Harold's is running out. In 2 months he will be dead. But he doesn't know that yet. For now he is going back to France, back to camp, back to relative safety. He can rest, write letters home, maybe get a pass to Paris. He has earned it. He has done his duty and more. The truck rolls south through the autumn countryside, carrying Harold toward a rest he desperately needs and a fate he cannot foresee. November 1944, Camp Mourmelin, France. Camp Mourmelin is a world away from combat. Located near Reims in northeastern France, it serves as a rest and refit center for Allied forces. When the 101st Airborne Division arrives in early October 1944, the camp offers something the soldiers have not experienced in months: safety, comfort, and routine. For Harold and the other veterans of Normandy and Holland, Camp Mourmelin is paradise. They sleep in real beds with clean sheets. They eat hot meals in mess halls. They shower regularly and wear clean uniforms. They attend training sessions and equipment maintenance, but these activities are light compared to the intensity of combat. Most importantly, they are not being shot at. The division desperately needs this break. The 101st has been in almost continuous combat since D-Day, with only brief respites between operations. The casualty lists are staggering: thousands of men killed, wounded, or missing. Entire companies have been decimated and rebuilt with replacements, then decimated again. The survivors are physically exhausted and mentally worn down. Without rest, the division will cease to be effective as a fighting force. Camp Mourmelin provides that rest. The men of the 502nd Pier spend their days on light duties and their evenings in recreation. There are movies, USO shows, sports competitions, and passes to nearby towns. Reims is close enough for day trips, and the Champagne capital of France offers plenty of opportunities for soldiers with money to spend and time to kill. Some men visit Paris on longer passes, seeing the recently liberated City of Light and enjoying everything it has to offer. Harold participates in all of this. He is now a combat veteran with 2 Purple Hearts, one for his wound at Cairnton, another presumably earned in Holland, though the records are unclear. He is respected by the newer men, looked to for guidance and leadership. He has survived what so many have not, and that survival has given him status within the unit. But survival has also changed him. He is not the same young man who volunteered to become a paratrooper. Combat has marked him, has shown him things that cannot be unseen, has forced him to do things that cannot be undone. He has killed enemy soldiers, how many he cannot say, and it is not something he likes to think about. He has watched friends die, sometimes able to help them, sometimes helpless to do anything but watch. He carries these memories with him, a weight that cannot be put down. The replacements who join the 502nd at Camp Mourmelin provide a stark contrast to veterans like Harold. These young men are fresh from the United States, having completed their training and crossed the Atlantic to join the war in Europe. They are eager, confident, untested. They see the veterans' combat badges and jump wings and Purple Hearts with awe, imagining glory and heroism. The veterans see the replacements and remember their own innocence, now long gone. Harold probably tries to mentor some of these replacements, sharing what he knows about staying alive in combat. The lessons are simple but crucial. Keep your head down, don't bunch up, dig your foxhole deep, trust your training, look after your buddies. Simple lessons, but ones that can mean the difference between life and death. Whether the replacements truly understand or just think they do is impossible to know until they face combat themselves. The division also receives new equipment at Camp Mermelin. Weapons are cleaned, repaired, or replaced. Parachutes are repacked. Uniforms are issued to replace those worn out by months of combat. The Army is trying to bring the 101st back to full strength and full readiness, preparing the division for its next mission, whatever and wherever that might be. Nobody knows what the next mission will be. Rumors circulate constantly. Maybe they will jump into Germany itself, seizing bridges over the Rhine. Maybe they will be held in reserve for a final airborne assault into the heart of the Third Reich. Maybe, if the war progresses well enough, they will not be needed at all and can go home. This last possibility seems increasingly plausible. By November 1944, Germany appears to be on the verge of collapse. The Allied armies have liberated France and are pressing against Germany's western border. In the east, the Soviet Union has driven the Germans out of Russia and Eastern Europe and is preparing to invade Germany itself. American bombers pound German cities day and night. The German army is being ground down by attrition, losing men and equipment faster than they can be replaced. Many observers believe the war will be over by Christmas, or at least by early 1945. Harold and his fellow paratroopers hope this is true. They have done their part, multiple combat jumps, months of fighting, wounds, and hardships endured. They are ready for the war to end so they can go home, but they are also realists. They are soldiers in an elite division. If the army needs them, they will go. They will jump, they will fight, they will do their duty. That's what they signed up for. As November turns to December, life at Camp Mermelin continues its comfortable routine. Christmas is approaching, and the Army is making plans for celebrations, special meals, entertainment, religious services. The men of the 101st look forward to their first peaceful Christmas since entering the war. Even if they cannot be home with their families, at least they will not be in combat. On December 16, 1944, everything changes. In the early morning darkness, German forces launch a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, a region that Allied intelligence had considered too rugged for major operations. 3 German armies, including elite SS Panzer divisions, crash into thinly held American lines, creating panic and confusion. The Germans are driving west, trying to reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies in two. It is Hitler's last great gamble, a desperate attempt to turn the tide of the war. The German offensive creates chaos in the Allied command structure. Nobody expected this. The Germans were supposed to be beaten, supposed to be on their last legs. Instead, they have assembled a powerful striking force and achieved complete surprise. American units are being overrun. Entire regiments are surrendering or falling back in disorder. Gaps are opening in the Allied lines, and German armor is pouring through. The Allies need reinforcements immediately, and the only available reserve is the airborne divisions resting in France. On December 17th, the 101st Airborne Division receives emergency orders: move to Belgium immediately and help stop the German offensive. The specific destination is a small town few of the soldiers have heard of, Bastogne. Camp Mermelin erupts into frenzied activity. The comfortable routine is shattered. Men are roused from their beds, given hasty briefings, ordered to pack their equipment and prepare to move. There is no time for proper preparation, no time to gather all necessary supplies. The division will move with whatever they have on hand and hope for resupply later. Harold packs his equipment with the speed born of experience. He knows the essentials: weapon, ammunition, rations, first aid kit, extra socks. Everything else is secondary. He has done this before, has gone from safety to combat with little warning. This is what it means to be in the airborne. You go where you are needed, when you are needed, ready or not. The movement to Belgium is chaotic and uncomfortable. The 101st travels in whatever vehicles can be found: trucks, buses, even civilian vehicles commandeered for military use. Harold and dozens of other paratroopers crowd into the back of an open cattle truck, exposed to the December cold. They have minimal winter clothing. The army had not expected them to need it at Camp Mermelin, and there is no time to issue proper gear. The convoy drives north through the night and the following day, moving against a tide of refugees and retreating soldiers fleeing the German advance. The roads are clogged with traffic, progress is slow, and the weather is terrible. Snow is falling, temperatures are plummeting, and the paratroopers in their open trucks are freezing. They huddle together for warmth, trying to protect themselves from the wind and snow, but there is no real shelter. Harold sits in the cattle truck, cold seeping into his bones, and wonders what they are driving toward. Reports filtering back from the front are confused and alarming. The Germans have broken through, have surrounded American units, have tanks in superior numbers. The 101st is being sent to shore up the defenses, but nobody knows exactly what the situation is or what the division will face when it arrives. The journey takes hours, the cattle truck grinding slowly north through the snow. Harold tries to rest, but the cold and the jolting of the truck make sleep impossible. Around him, other soldiers sit silent, wrapped in their own thoughts. Some pray. Some stare into space. Some try to joke, but the humor feels forced. They are going into combat again, unprepared and under-equipped, against an enemy that has just demonstrated it still has plenty of fight left. On December 19th, the 101st Airborne Division arrives in Bastogne and immediately begins establishing defensive positions around the town. The Germans are converging on Bastogne from multiple directions, and the situation is deteriorating rapidly. The paratroopers have arrived just in time. Within days, they will be surrounded, cut off from friendly forces, fighting for survival in a siege that will test them to their absolute limits. Harold climbs down from the cattle truck, stiff and cold and tired. He looks around at Bastogne, a small Belgian town he will come to know intimately over the next month. He does not know that this is where his war will end, that he will die in the snow and forests surrounding this town. He knows only that there is work to do, positions to prepare, Germans to fight. The Battle of the Bulge has begun, and Harold C. Skipton is in the middle of it. December 2031, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. Bastogne is not much to look at, a small market town in the Belgian Ardennes, population around 4,000, known for nothing in particular, but its location makes it strategically crucial. 7 roads converge on Bastogne, making it the key crossroads in the region. Any force trying to advance through the Ardennes needs to control Bastogne to have freedom of maneuver. The Germans know this, which is why they are converging on the town from multiple directions. The 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of the 10th Armored Division and various artillery and support units, has been ordered to hold Bastogne at all costs. The total force is about 18,000 men, facing German forces that outnumber them several times over. The mission is simple: hold until relieved. General Patton's Third Army is reorienting from its offensive operations and will drive north to break through to Bastogne, but that will take time. The defenders need to hold for at least a week, possibly longer. Harold and the 502nd Pier are assigned to defensive positions on the western side of the Bastogne perimeter. The division forms a roughly circular defense around the town, with each regiment responsible for a sector. The paratroopers immediately begin digging foxholes and fighting positions, preparing for the German assault they know is coming. The weather is miserable, cold, wet, with snow falling intermittently. The ground is frozen hard, making digging difficult. The paratroopers chip away at the earth with their entrenching tools, creating shallow holes that offer some protection from fire and a little shelter from the wind. But the holes cannot keep out the cold. Nothing can keep out the cold. Harold digs his foxhole alongside other men from his unit. They work in shifts, some digging while others keep watch or try to rest. The defensive position is in a wooded area outside Bastogne, offering some concealment but also limiting fields of fire. The Germans will be able to approach through the trees, using the forest for cover. The coming battle will be fought at close range, in the trees and snow. On December 21st, the Germans complete their encirclement of Bastogne. All roads into town are now cut. The 101st and the other defending units are surrounded, isolated from friendly forces. Resupply will be impossible except by air, and the weather is too bad for aircraft to fly. The defenders are on their own. Being surrounded is psychologically difficult, even for veteran soldiers. It violates the fundamental principle of military operations: maintain lines of communication and supply. But the men of the 101st are paratroopers, and being surrounded is what they train for. They are designed to operate behind enemy lines, cut off from support. If anyone can handle this situation, it is the Screaming Eagles. Still, the reality is daunting. The defenders have limited ammunition, limited food, limited medical supplies. They are outnumbered and outgunned. The weather is preventing air support or resupply, and the Germans are attacking from all directions, probing for weak points, trying to find a way to break through and overrun the defenses. Harold fights in several battles during the first days of the siege. The Germans attack repeatedly, sending infantry forward supported by armor. The defenders fight them off with rifles, machine guns, and artillery. American tank destroyers from the 10th Armored Division knock out German tanks at close range. The artillery, though running low on ammunition, fires carefully aimed barrages at German assembly areas. The combat is brutal and constant. There are no front lines, no safe areas. German infiltrators work their way through gaps in the defenses, attacking from unexpected directions. Every position might be hit at any time. The defenders have to maintain constant vigilance, always ready to fight. The cold is as much an enemy as the Germans. Temperatures drop well below freezing. Snow falls frequently. The soldiers lack adequate winter clothing. They were rushed to Bastogne without time to gather proper gear. Many have only their standard wool uniforms and M1943 field jackets, insufficient against the Belgian winter. They try to improvise, wearing multiple layers of clothing, wrapping themselves in blankets or parachute silk, stuffing newspapers inside their uniforms for insulation. Nothing really works. The cold penetrates everything. Trench foot becomes a serious problem. Soldiers standing in frozen foxholes, unable to dry their feet or change their socks, develop this debilitating condition where flesh begins to rot from prolonged exposure to cold and wet. Men lose toes, feet, even entire legs to trench foot. The medics do what they can, but resources are limited, and the conditions that cause trench foot cannot be eliminated. Food is scarce. The defenders are on short rations, eating once or twice a day if they are lucky. The food is cold. No fires are allowed during daylight because smoke would draw German artillery. They eat K rations or C rations, the packaged meals that American soldiers have come to loathe. Some of the food has frozen solid and must be thawed inside uniforms before it can be eaten. Water freezes in canteens, must be melted. Every basic human need becomes a challenge. Medical care is overwhelmed. The aid stations are full of wounded men, and supplies are running low. Morphine, bandages, plasma, everything is being rationed. Doctors and medics perform surgery by candlelight in makeshift operating rooms, trying to save lives with inadequate equipment. Men with wounds that would normally warrant evacuation must remain in Bastogne and continue fighting if they can walk and hold a weapon. Despite these hardships, morale remains relatively good. The men of the 101st take pride in their ability to hold against superior numbers. They have faith that Patton will break through and relieve them, and they trust in their leaders, particularly General Anthony McAuliffe, the acting division commander. On December 22nd, the Germans sent a delegation under a flag of truce to demand the surrender of Bastogne. The German message is formal and courteous, noting the American garrison is surrounded and outgunned, offering honorable surrender to avoid needless bloodshed. General McAuliffe's response becomes one of the most famous in military history. Nuts. When the Germans ask for clarification of this American slang, they are told it means go to hell. The American response is delivered back to the German lines, and the siege continues. McAuliffe's defiant reply boosts morale among the defenders and becomes a symbol of American fighting spirit. The 101st is not surrendering. They will hold Bastogne or die trying. Harold is inspired by this defiance, as are all the defenders. They are cold, hungry, low on ammunition, and surrounded by Germans who want to kill them. But they are not beaten. They are paratroopers, elite troops, screaming eagles. They will hold. The Germans continue their attacks throughout late December. They throw infantry, armor, and artillery at the American defenses, trying to find a weak point. The defenders fight them off repeatedly, though the perimeter gradually shrinks as casualties mount and positions become untenable. Each defensive position is bought with American blood. Each yard of ground is contested. Harold fights in this grinding defensive battle, probably manning a position in the forest, engaging German troops as they advance through the trees. The combat is exhausting, short, violent firefights followed by periods of tense waiting, always cold, always tired, always hungry. Sleep is snatched in brief intervals, never enough, never restful. The men age years in these days, the strain showing on their faces, in their movements, in their eyes. On December 23rd, the weather finally clears enough for aircraft to fly. American C-47s appear over Bastogne, dropping supplies by parachute, ammunition, food, medical supplies, the resources the defenders desperately need. The sight of those aircraft, of those parachutes blossoming in the sky, is almost miraculous. The men cheer, knowing they have not been forgotten, knowing the army is doing everything possible to support them. But the resupply is not enough. The defenders need too much, and the aircraft can only carry so much. The siege continues. The Germans keep attacking. The cold does not relent. The casualties keep mounting. Christmas 1944 arrives. The soldiers had hoped to spend it in Camp Mermelin, safe and comfortable. Instead, they spend it in frozen foxholes, fighting for their lives. There are no Christmas dinners, no celebrations. Some units hold brief religious services, huddling together in the snow to pray and sing hymns. But mostly, it is just another day of cold and combat and death. Harold probably thinks of home on Christmas Day. He probably wonders if he will ever see another Christmas, ever return to whatever life he left behind when he volunteered to become a paratrooper. But he cannot dwell on such thoughts. Survival requires focus on the immediate, the next attack, the next watch, the next frozen meal. The future is an abstraction. Only the present is real. On December 26th, lead elements of Patton's Third Army break through the German lines and reach Bastogne. The siege is lifted. Supplies and reinforcements pour into the town. The defenders have held. They have accomplished their mission. They have written one of the most famous chapters in American military history. But the battle is not over. The Germans still surround Bastogne on three sides, and they are determined to cut the corridor that Patton has opened. The 101st Airborne will remain in the line, fighting to expand and secure the Bastogne perimeter. For Harold and his brothers in the 502nd, there will be no rest, no relief. They will continue fighting through the end of December and into January, through the coldest, most miserable conditions imaginable. The relief of Bastogne means the defenders will not starve or run out of ammunition, but it does not end their ordeal. The Germans are still attacking, still trying to recapture the town, still killing American soldiers. The 101st must hold its positions and, when ordered, attack to push the Germans back. This means more combat, more casualties, more days and nights in frozen foxholes. Harold survives through the end of December and into the new year. Each day that passes is a small victory, another 24 hours of life in a place where death is random and constant. He has now been in combat almost continuously since D-Day, with only brief respites between operations. He has survived longer than most defied odds that have killed thousands. But in war, survival is often just a matter of time. Eventually, almost everyone's luck runs out. January 21, 1945, Bastogne perimeter, dawn. Harold wakes to another frozen dawn. He has been asleep, if the fitful unconsciousness he achieves in his foxhole can be called sleep, for perhaps 2 hours. His body aches from the cold, from sleeping on frozen ground, from weeks of deprivation and stress. He is beyond exhausted, operating on willpower and instinct. Around him, other soldiers from the 502nd are stirring, preparing for another day of combat. They check their weapons, verify their ammunition, eat cold rations if they have any. The routine is automatic, done without thought or conversation. These men are too tired, too cold, too worn down for unnecessary words. The forest around their position is eerily quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Snow covers everything, muffling sound, creating a strange, peaceful quality that belies the violence that has occurred here and will occur again. Trees are shattered by artillery fire, their broken limbs hanging at odd angles. Shell craters pockmark the ground. The snow is dirty and trampled where men have fought and died. Harold knows the Germans are out there, probably not far away, preparing their own attacks or waiting to repel American advances. The front lines in the Battle of the Bulge are fluid and confused. Units interpenetrate each other. No man's land is often just a few hundred yards of forest or open ground. Combat happens at close range, sudden and brutal. Today will be no different from the days that preceded it. Patrols, possible attacks, artillery fire, cold, hunger, exhaustion. Harold has no reason to think this day will be special, no premonition that this is his last dawn. He simply does what he has done every morning for weeks, prepares to survive another day. As daylight grows, orders come down from battalion. The 502nd will conduct operations to expand and secure the perimeter. This means attacking, moving forward against German positions, taking ground. After weeks of defensive fighting, the division is going on the offensive, trying to push the Germans back and create more breathing room around Bastogne. Harold's unit receives its specific mission and begins preparing. They check equipment one final time, coordinate with adjacent units, study what maps and aerial photos are available. The attack will go forward soon, and every man needs to know his role, his objectives, his sector of responsibility. The attack begins with an artillery barrage, American guns pounding suspected German positions. The shells scream overhead and explode in the forest ahead, sending up geysers of snow and dirt and shattered wood. The barrage is shorter than Harold would like. Ammunition is still being rationed, even after the relief of Bastogne. But it is something, and it may suppress some of the German defenders. When the barrage lifts, the paratroopers move forward. Harold advances with his unit through the snow-covered forest, weapon ready, eyes scanning for threats. The movement is slow and cautious. Every tree might hide a German soldier. Every snow-covered mound might conceal a foxhole or machine gun position. The paratroopers move by bounds, some providing covering fire while others advance, then switching roles. The Germans open fire. Machine guns rattle from concealed positions. Rifles crack. Mortar rounds fall among the advancing Americans. Men fall, wounded or killed. The attack bogs down as the paratroopers take cover and return fire. This is the nature of infantry combat in forested terrain. Brief advances followed by firefights, slow progress measured in yards and bodies. Harold is in the middle of it, doing what he has done dozens of times before, moving, shooting, taking cover, moving again. His training and experience guide him, keeping him alive as chaos erupts around him. He has survived this long by being smart, by being careful, by not taking unnecessary risks. But in combat, sometimes there are no safe choices. Sometimes you are simply in the wrong place at the wrong moment. A German artillery shell explodes near Harold's position. The blast is enormous, a violence beyond description. Shrapnel scythes through the air, invisible and lethal. The concussion slams into bodies like a physical blow, throwing men around like rag dolls. Trees are shredded. Snow is vaporized. The world becomes noise and shock and death. Harold is hit. Multiple pieces of shrapnel tear into his body, causing devastating wounds. He goes down, his weapon falling from his hands, his body crumpling into the snow. The pain is beyond anything he has experienced, beyond what morphine can address, beyond what the human mind can fully process. His body is broken, bleeding, dying. His fellow soldiers are around him immediately. This is the covenant of combat. You do not leave your wounded. Medics are called forward, risking their lives to reach Harold and other wounded men. They work frantically, trying to stop bleeding, trying to stabilize patients, trying to save lives under impossible conditions. But Harold's wounds are too severe. The shrapnel has done too much damage to too many vital areas. Even with immediate surgery in a fully equipped hospital, his chances would be slim. Here, in a frozen forest under fire with limited medical supplies, there is nothing that can save him. The medic does what he can. He applies bandages, trying to control the bleeding. He injects morphine to ease the pain. He holds Harold's hand and speaks to him, offering what comfort is possible. Other soldiers stand nearby, keeping watch, providing security, bearing witness to their brother's death. Harold C. Skipton dies in the snow on January 21, 1945. He is 22 years old. He has served in the 101st Airborne Division for over 2 years. He has made 3 combat jumps, D-Day, Market Garden, and the smaller operations in Holland. He has fought in Normandy, been wounded at Skipton, recovered and returned to fight in Holland, been rushed to Bastogne in a cattle truck, survived the siege, and finally fallen in the offensive operations that followed. His war is over. His journey ends here in this forest, in this snow, far from home. He will not see peace. He will not return to his family. He will not grow old or have children or live the life that should have been his. All of that is gone, taken by a German artillery shell on a January morning in 1945. His body is carried back from the front lines, wrapped in a blanket or poncho, handled with respect by men who knew him and fought beside him. He is taken to a collection point where other dead are gathered, where chaplains say prayers over the fallen, where graves registration personnel begin the grim task of identification and documentation. Harold will be buried initially in a temporary military cemetery in Belgium, one of many established during the war to handle the thousands of American dead. After the war, his family will have the choice of bringing his body home for burial or leaving him in a permanent American military cemetery in Europe. Whichever they choose, his grave will be marked, his name recorded, his sacrifice acknowledged. But for his unit, for the men who fought beside him, Harold's death is just one more loss in a war that has taken so many. They mourn him briefly, then return to the fight. They have to. The Germans are still out there, still attacking, still killing. The living cannot dwell on the dead, not if they want to survive themselves. Harold's foxhole will be occupied by another soldier, his position in formation filled by a replacement, his equipment passed on to someone who needs it. The war does not pause for individual grief. The 502nd Pier continues fighting around Bastogne through January and into February. The Battle of the Bulge gradually winds down as the Allies push the Germans back to their starting positions and beyond. The desperate German offensive has failed, costing Hitler's army men and equipment it can never replace. The end of the war is now inevitable, though it will take several more months of hard fighting. Harold does not see that ending. He does not witness the final Allied victory, the liberation of the concentration camps, the German surrender, the celebrations in the streets. He has given everything he has, including his life, but he does not live to see the fruits of that sacrifice. This is the tragedy of his story and of thousands like him. They died on the cusp of victory, in the final months of a war that was already won but not yet finished. The family's grief and the DCADES of mystery. News of Harold's death reaches his family through the standard military telegram, the dreaded message that every family with someone in uniform fears receiving. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that Private First Class Harold C. Skipton was killed in action. The words are formal, bureaucratic, inadequate to convey the enormity of loss. Harold's parents, his siblings if he has any, his extended family, all must process the reality that he is gone, that he will never come home, that the young man who volunteered to serve his country has paid the ultimate price. The grief is overwhelming and complicated. There is pride. Harold served with distinction in an elite unit, fought in some of the war's most important battles, died doing his duty. There is sorrow, a life cut short, potential unrealized, all the moments and memories that will never be. And there is a kind of bewilderment. Why Harold? Why not someone else? Why did he survive D-Day and Normandy and Holland only to die in Belgium just months before the war ended? These questions have no answers. Death in combat is random, capricious, senseless. The bullet or shell that kills one man passes harmlessly by another standing inches away. Survival is often just luck, and Harold's luck ran out on January 21, 1945. His family must accept this, though acceptance is neither quick nor easy. What makes Harold's story even more poignant is that his grandfather served in the Pacific Theater during the same war. Two generations of the same family were at war simultaneously, fighting on opposite sides of the globe. The grandfather survived his service and returned home, only to learn that his grandson had not been so fortunate. He carried this grief for the rest of his life, passed away without ever knowing the full story of Harold's service. Because the full story was lost. The details of Harold's combat experience, the 3 jumps, the wounding at Cairnton, the recovery and return to duty, the service in Holland, the rush to Bastogne, all of this was unknown to his family for decades. They knew he had served in the 101st Airborne. They knew he had died in Belgium. But the complete picture of his service was not available to them. This was not uncommon. The military in World War II was fighting a global conflict involving millions of soldiers. Record-keeping, while generally good, was not perfect. The chaos of combat, the destruction of documents, the sheer scale of operations meant that some details were lost or never properly recorded. Families often received minimal information about how their loved ones had served and died. For Harold's family, this meant living with uncertainty and unanswered questions. What battles had he fought in? Had he suffered? Did he die quickly or slowly? Was he alone or with his comrades? These questions haunted them, a secondary trauma added to the grief of loss. It was only decades later, through the work of military historians and researchers, that the full story of Harold's service began to emerge. Records were discovered, cross-referenced, analyzed. Veterans of the 502nd Pier were interviewed, their memories recorded before they passed away. Gradually, the pieces came together. Harold had indeed jumped on D-Day, had been wounded at Cairnton on June 10, 1944. He had recovered at the 307th Station Hospital in England and returned to his unit at Camp Chilton Foliat. He had jumped into Holland during Operation Market Garden. He had been rushed to Bastogne in December 1944. And he had died on January 21, 1945, from wounds sustained during offensive operations around the Bastogne perimeter. This information, discovered long after Harold's death, long after many who knew him had also passed away, provides some closure. His family, or what remains of it, can now know what he did, where he went, what he endured. They can understand the full scope of his service and sacrifice. They can be proud not just that he served, but of how extraordinarily he served. Harold's story also represents the tens of thousands of similar stories from World War II, soldiers whose names are not famous, who did not win the Medal of Honor, who are not featured in books or movies, but who served with courage and dedication. These are the men who actually won the war, not through brilliant strategy or dramatic heroics, but through showing up and doing the job, day after day, battle after battle, until they died or the war ended. The 101st Airborne Division finished the war with a remarkable combat record. After Bastogne, the division pushed into Germany, participated in the occupation of Bavaria, and eventually captured Hitler's Eagle's Nest at Berchtesgaden. The division was inactivated after the war but would be reactivated for future conflicts, continuing its proud tradition. Many of Harold's fellow paratroopers survived the war and returned home. They got married, had families, built careers, lived the lives that Harold never got to live. Some became famous, men like Dick Winters and Bill Guaner, whose stories were told in Band of Brothers. Others returned to obscurity, their service known only to their families and fellow veterans. These survivors carried the memory of men like Harold, the ones who didn't make it, who fell along the way. Veterans' reunions became occasions not just for celebration but for remembrance, for telling stories about fallen comrades, for ensuring that the dead were not forgotten. Harold's name would have been mentioned at these gatherings, his service honored, his memory preserved by those who knew him. The military cemeteries in Europe, where thousands of American soldiers are buried, serve as permanent memorials to men like Harold. Whether he rests in one of these cemeteries or was brought home for burial, his grave is marked, his sacrifice recorded. Visitors to these cemeteries are often struck by the endless rows of white crosses and stars of David, each representing a life lost, a family's grief, a story that deserves to be told. Harold C. Skipton is one of over 400,000 American military personnel who died during World War II. He is one of approximately 19,000 soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division who were killed or died of wounds during the war. He is one of hundreds of men from the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment who did not come home. His death was not unique, but it mattered to his family, to his unit, to the cause for which he fought. The meaning of sacrifice. Harold C. Skipton's story invites reflection on the nature of military service, sacrifice, and what we owe to those who fight in our nation's wars. He was not a professional soldier. He was a civilian who volunteered, was trained, and was sent to war. He did not seek glory or fame. He simply did what he believed was his duty. His journey from volunteer to combat veteran to casualty encapsulates the experience of an entire generation, the so-called greatest generation that came of age during the Depression and fought in World War II. These young people faced challenges we can barely imagine: economic hardship as children, global war as young adults, the burden of rebuilding the world in the aftermath. Harold's service demonstrates the extraordinary capability of ordinary people when tested by extraordinary circumstances. He was not superhuman. He felt fear, experienced pain, knew exhaustion and despair. But he kept going. He jumped from aircraft into enemy fire. He fought through hedgerows and forests. He survived wounds and returned to battle. He endured the siege of Bastogne. He did all of this not because he was special, but because circumstances demanded it, and he rose to meet those demands. This is the true heroism of World War II, not the dramatic moments featured in films, but the quiet courage of men like Harold who simply did what needed to be done, day after day, until they couldn't anymore. They were not warriors by nature or training. They were farmers and factory workers, students and salesmen, boys who became soldiers because their country needed them to be soldiers. Harold's death at 22 raises uncomfortable questions about the cost of war. He never married, never had children, never pursued a career or built a life. All of that potential was erased by a German artillery shell. Was it worth it? Did his death serve a purpose? These are questions that each person must answer for themselves, but they are questions we must ask. The conventional answer is that Harold's sacrifice, and that of hundreds of thousands like him, was necessary to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, regimes that represented genuine evil, that would have imposed unimaginable suffering on the world if allowed to triumph. This is true. The Allied victory in World War II was righteous and necessary. The world is immeasurably better because men like Harold were willing to fight and die to secure that victory. But this answer, while true, does not erase the tragedy of Harold's death. He was 22. He had barely begun to live. Whatever he might have become, whatever he might have contributed to the world in peacetime was lost. This is the true cost of war, not just the number of dead, but all the unlived lives, all the unrealized potential, all the children never born and grandchildren never known. Harold's story also reminds us of the fog of war and the passage of time. For decades, even his own family did not know the full scope of his service. His complete story had to be reconstructed by historians years after his death. How many other Harold Skiptons are there? Men whose service has been forgotten, whose stories have been lost, whose sacrifices are known only to God. The answer is thousands, probably tens of thousands. For every soldier whose story has been preserved and honored, there are many more who have faded into obscurity. They served, they fought, they died, and then they were forgotten except by those who loved them. This is perhaps inevitable. Memory fades, generations pass, the urgent concerns of the present overwhelm the history of the past. But it is also a tragedy, because each of these forgotten soldiers has a story that deserves to be told, a sacrifice that deserves to be honored. What do we owe to men like Harold? At minimum, we owe them memory. We owe them the effort to preserve their stories, to understand what they endured, to ensure that their sacrifices are not forgotten. This means supporting military history projects, preserving records, interviewing veterans while they are still alive, teaching young people about the wars their ancestors fought. We also owe them the commitment to use military force wisely and sparingly. Harold and his generation fought a necessary war against enemies who threatened the very foundations of civilization. Not every conflict since has been so clear-cut. If we honor the sacrifice of World War II veterans, we must be thoughtful about when and why we send soldiers into harm's way. Their sacrifice demands that we not waste the lives of future generations on unnecessary or poorly conceived conflicts. Finally, we owe them the promise to build a world worthy of their sacrifice. Harold died fighting for freedom, democracy, and human dignity. The post-war world, for all its flaws and failings, has generally advanced those values. More people live in freedom today than in 1945. Democracy, while challenged, has spread to nations that were once dictatorships. Human rights, while still violated far too often, are at least acknowledged as universal principles. This progress is Harold's legacy, along with hundreds of thousands of others who died in World War II. They bought this better world with their blood. They paid a price we cannot fully comprehend so that we could live in peace and prosperity. We dishonor them if we squander that gift, if we allow the values they fought for to erode, if we forget what they endured to secure our freedom. Harold C. Skipton was one soldier in one unit in one campaign of one war. His story is important not because he did anything unique or dramatic, but precisely because he was ordinary. He represents the millions of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when history demanded it. His story is their story. His sacrifice is their sacrifice. And his memory is a sacred trust that we must preserve. January 21, 1945, Bastogne, Belgium. The snow continues to fall on the forest where Harold died. His body has been taken away, but the war continues. Other soldiers occupy his foxhole, take his place in formation, carry on the fight. This is how war works. Individuals fall, but the unit endures, the mission continues, the battle goes on. In a few months, Germany will surrender. The men of the 101st Airborne who survive will celebrate VE Day, will begin the journey home, will try to return to civilian life and process what they have experienced. They will carry memories of Harold and all the others who didn't make it, will tell stories about them at reunions, will ensure their names are not forgotten. Harold's family will grieve, will try to rebuild their lives around the hole his death has left, will treasure what few memories and possessions they have of him. His grandfather, serving in the Pacific, will learn of his death and carry that sorrow for the rest of his life. The family will display Harold's purple hearts and other decorations, tangible evidence of his service and sacrifice. Decades will pass, the war will recede into history. The veterans will age and eventually pass away, taking their memories with them. New generations will be born who have no personal connection to World War II, who know it only from books and films and documentaries. The world Harold fought for will change in ways he could never have imagined. But his story, once nearly lost, has been preserved. Through the patient work of historians and the dedication of those who believe these stories matter, we now know what Harold C. Skipton did, where he fought, how he died. We know he was a paratrooper in the 502nd Pier, 101st Airborne Division. We know he jumped on D-Day, was wounded at Cairnton, recovered and jumped again in Holland, was rushed to Bastogne, and died there on January 21, 1945. We know, in other words, that he was a soldier who did his duty, who served with courage, who gave everything he had, including his life. We know that he mattered, that his service made a difference, that his sacrifice helped secure the victory that ended history's most terrible war. This is Harold's complete story, from volunteer to paratrooper to combat veteran to casualty. It is a story repeated thousands of times in World War II, each variation unique in its details but similar in its arc. Young men answered their country's call, endured training that tested them to their limits, went to war, fought with courage, and either survived or did not. Harold did not. But he did not die in vain. His sacrifice, combined with that of hundreds of thousands of others, purchased freedom for millions and ensured that tyranny did not triumph. This is worth remembering. This is worth honoring. This is why Harold's story and stories like his must continue to be told. Private First Class Harold C. Skipton, 101st Airborne Division, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, 3rd Battalion, Headquarters Company, jumped on D-Day, wounded at Cairnton, recovered and returned to duty, jumped in Holland, rushed to Bastogne, killed in action January 21, 1945, age 22. He answered the call, he did his duty, he gave his life. We will remember.